This courtroom witnessed something no one expected. Cameras were rolling, reporters were scribbling notes, and the air was thick with tension. On the bench sat a powerful judge, known for his sharp tongue and even sharper ego. Across the room stood Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, calm but clearly under fire. The judge smirked and began to tear into her, mocking her credentials, her intelligence, even her right to speak. The crowd fell silent. You could hear every breath. But within minutes, that same judge would be the one in shock, his robe stripped of authority, his hands behind his back. What happened next stunned everyone watching, and it changed Jasmine's career forever. This is the story of how one woman turned humiliation into justice. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from, and hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even bigger. Jasmine Crockett's story begins long before the cameras and the headlines. Born in Texas, she started her career not in politics, but in the courtroom. She worked as a defense attorney, standing up for people who had no voice and no power. Her drive came from seeing injustice up close. She saw young men locked away for crimes they did not commit, mothers losing custody because they could not afford a good lawyer, and families crushed by a system designed to favor the rich. Jasmine made a promise to herself. If the system was broken, she would be the one to fix it. Her reputation grew fast. She became known as the lawyer who never backed down. She faced prosecutors who thought they could intimidate her, but she never flinched. She took on cases that others avoided because they were messy or unpopular. And each time, she fought with the same conviction. Justice was not meant for a few. It was meant for everyone. That fire led her to politics. When she ran for Congress, people saw her as different from the usual faces on Capitol Hill. She was raw, honest, and unafraid to challenge corruption wherever she saw it. Jasmine had faced powerful men before, but none like the judge she was about to meet. This time, it would not be about winning a case. It would be about surviving a trap. Because on that day in court, she walked in to testify about a corruption case involving millions in misused public funds. She had evidence that could shake the foundation of a local power circle, and the man presiding over the hearing, Judge William Hartman, was deeply tied to that same network. He was supposed to be impartial, but his eyes told a different story the moment she entered. He greeted her with a smirk. "Congresswoman Crockett, this is not a political rally," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. The crowd chuckled. Jasmine stood still, holding her papers. "I am here as a citizen, Your Honor," she replied calmly. But Hartman kept pushing. He questioned her motives, accused her of using the court for publicity, and mocked her record as a lawyer. Each jab was louder than the last. Reporters started typing faster. Cameras zoomed in. He was trying to humiliate her publicly, to break her composure. But Jasmine did not flinch. She let him speak, let him reveal his arrogance to everyone watching. And then, when he finally paused, she looked up and said, "If you are finished, Your Honor, I would like to proceed with evidence that concerns your financial dealings." The room froze. Even the judge's smile faded. What Jasmine revealed next sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Months earlier, while investigating misuse of taxpayer funds, her legal team discovered a paper trail, hidden accounts, offshore payments, and a series of property transfers under the names of Hartman's family members. She had come prepared, with documents verified by forensic auditors and signed affidavits. The judge tried to interrupt, but it was too late. The court stenographer was recording every word. Jasmine spoke with precision, every line supported by proof. The crowd that once laughed now sat in stunned silence. And when she placed a final piece of evidence on the table, a signed authorization linking Hartman directly to an illegal transfer, his face turned pale. He slammed his gavel, shouting for order, but the order had already turned against him. A federal marshal standing by the door received a signal from the prosecutor's table. Within minutes, the same man who had mocked Jasmine was ordered to step down and placed under investigation. The arrogance vanished. The room erupted with whispers. Cameras captured every second as Judge Hartman was escorted out, handcuffed, silent, humiliated. Jasmine stood there quietly. No triumph, no gloating. just calm, steady focus. She knew that justice was not about revenge. It was about truth catching up with power. That moment became a national story. Headlines read, "Judge arrested after mocking Congresswoman." It was more than poetic irony. It was accountability. In the days that followed, Jasmine received both praise and backlash. Some called her brave, others called her reckless. But one thing was undeniable. She had exposed the rot inside a system that too many people had learned to fear. Her calm defiance became a symbol of courage. She showed that power built on arrogance will always collapse when faced with integrity and evidence. And as she left the courthouse that day, reporters crowded around her asking for comment. She simply said, "No one is above the law, not even the ones who think they write it." Her words went viral. Overnight, Jasmine Crockett became more than a politician. She became a reminder that justice, when pursued with conviction, can still surprise the world. This was not just another courtroom drama. It was a real-life justice story, one where the tables truly turned. And as for the judge, his name was later struck from the state register. He faced charges for corruption and obstruction of justice. So what do you think? Was this a victory for one woman, or a victory for truth itself? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe in stories where courage wins over corruption, make sure to subscribe. Because tomorrow's story is even bigger. Judge Howard Gates was the kind of man who could silence a room without saying a word. He carried himself like he owned the courtroom, with that slow, measured walk and the cold stare that made even experienced lawyers nervous. His reputation stretched far beyond the courthouse walls. He was respected, yes, but also feared. Everyone knew his sharp tongue, his unpredictable temper, and the way he could twist a legal argument until it broke in his favor. People said he had friends in high places, political connections that made him untouchable. And if anyone ever questioned his fairness, the whispers died quickly. No one wanted to go against him. There were stories about him, of course. Cases that vanished. Witnesses who changed their statements overnight. Decisions that always seemed to protect the powerful. But nothing was ever proven. Judge Gates was careful, calculated, and protected by the same system he manipulated. When he entered the courtroom that morning, the energy shifted. Everyone straightened up, every movement suddenly cautious. Jasmine Crockett sat at the prosecution table, reviewing her notes, calm but alert. She knew who she was up against. Gates was not just a judge. He was part of the machine she had spent her career fighting. To him, she was an outsider, a woman who had no place challenging his authority to her. He was another symbol of everything wrong with the justice system. And on that morning, their worlds collided in a courtroom already heavy with tension. The case itself was one of the biggest corruption trials in years. The defendant was Richard Hale, a powerful real estate developer accused of siphoning public funds through fake construction projects. The charges detailed millions of dollars that vanished from community housing programs, money meant for struggling families. The evidence pointed to years of fraud hidden behind layers of shell companies and false invoices. Jasmine had been chosen to lead the prosecution team. For her, this was not just another assignment. It was personal. She had built her entire career fighting people like Hale, men who believed money could wash away guilt. But from the beginning, the case fell off. Key witnesses backed out without explanation. Some documents arrived redacted or missing entirely. And each time her team tried to dig deeper, they hit another wall. It became clear that someone powerful was pulling strings behind the scenes. The deeper they looked, the stronger the resistance grew. Still, Jasmine pushed forward. She refused to back down, even when colleagues warned her to tread carefully. When the trial began, she could feel the eyes of the nation watching. The stakes were enormous. A guilty verdict could expose an entire network of corruption. An acquittal would destroy months of work and crush public trust in the system. But what Jasmine did not know was that the corruption she was chasing was not just inside the defendant's company. It sat higher, much higher. It wore a robe, held a gavel, and was sitting right in front of her. Because Judge Howard Gates was not just overseeing the case. He was part of it. As the first witness took the stand, the tension grew thicker. Every objection Jasmine raised was overruled. Every question she asked seemed to irritate the judge. He cut her off, questioned her professionalism, and smiled coldly each time the defense scored a point. It was clear that this was not a fair trial, but Jasmine could feel it. Something deeper was hiding in plain sight, and soon she would uncover it. Because this was no longer just about a corrupt developer. It was about the man in the black robe who thought no one would ever dare expose him. The courtroom was silent when Jasmine Crockett stood to begin her case. Papers were neatly arranged in front of her, her tone steady, her presence calm. Across the bench sat Judge Howard Gates, watching her like a predator sizing up his prey. The moment she opened her mouth, his interruption came sharp and deliberate. "Miss Crockett," he said with a smirk, "do you always bury the truth under paperwork, or is that just your style?" A few people in the room laughed quietly. The defense attorney tried to hide a grin. Jasmine paused for a second, her eyes lifting toward the bench. "Your Honor," she replied, her voice even, "I believe the evidence will speak clearly once I present it." But Gates was not done. He leaned forward, speaking loudly enough for the reporters in the back to hear. "We will see if you have any evidence worth listening to. I would hate for the court's time to be wasted on emotion instead of facts." The room tensed. Jasmine took a slow breath, keeping her composure. She had faced tough judges before, but this felt different. This was not skepticism. It was mockery. Each time she tried to speak, he interrupted again, dismissing her arguments before she could finish. He twisted her words, questioned her motives, and treated her like a student being scolded. At one point he said, "You seem passionate, Miss Crockett." But passion does not replace legal skill. The defense laughed openly this time. The insult cut deep, but Jasmine refused to show it. She kept her tone measured and respectful. "I understand, Your Honor," she said, "and I intend to show only what the law requires, truth." She sat down slowly, her heart pounding, her knuckles tight around her pen. Inside, she felt the sting of humiliation, but beneath it was something stronger. She had been underestimated before. She had been mocked before. Every word from Judge Gates only strengthened her resolve. The crowd saw a woman keeping her cool. What they could not see was the spark beginning to form behind her calm expression. Because this was not just disrespect. It was self-protection. The judge was not mocking her by chance. He was hiding something. And Jasmine had just become his biggest threat. The days that followed felt different. The tension in the courtroom grew heavier, almost personal. Every time Jasmine made a move, Judge Gates found a way to block it. He dismissed her evidence on technicalities, refused to admit key documents, and granted every motion from the defense. It felt deliberate, like he wanted her case to crumble before it could even begin. Jasmine began to feel the pattern. Late one night, surrounded by files and coffee cups, she replayed every decision he had made since the trial began. It all pointed in one direction, away from the truth. So she started digging deeper. She called her contacts from her legal network, requested copies of property transfers, and rechecked every financial statement linked to the developer's company. She made phone calls long after midnight, cross-referencing signatures and tracing hidden accounts. Slowly, a shadow began to take shape behind the corruption she was exposing. It was not just the developer protecting himself. Someone higher was helping him stay untouchable. And then, one name kept appearing where it should not. Judge Howard Gates. It was there on a transfer authorization, again in a trust record, and once more buried inside a contract linked to the same real estate firm under investigation. The more she looked, the clearer it became. The man sitting on the bench, pretending to judge her case, was part of the very crime she was trying to uncover. Jasmine did not say a word to anyone. She kept her face calm in court, but behind the scenes, she was preparing for war. Because now she understood what was really happening. The man who tried to humiliate her in front of the world was fighting for his own survival. And he had no idea that she was about to turn the tables on him. The courtroom was silent when Jasmine Crockett rose again. Her earlier humiliation still lingered in the air, but now her movements were slow, deliberate, and confident. The defense team looked relaxed, certain the judge was on their side. Reporters leaned forward, sensing that something was about to shift. "Your Honor," Jasmine began, "I would like to submit Exhibit A for review." Judge Gates sighed loudly. "Miss Crockett, if this is more paperwork, then you are wasting everyone's time." Without reacting to his tone, Jasmine pressed a button on her remote. The large courtroom screen flickered to life, displaying rows of numbers and financial transfers. These records show payments made from the city's public funds into private accounts linked to the defendant's company, she said clearly. The judge's expression hardened. "You are showing documents without approval." "With respect, Your Honor," she replied, "these have already been entered into evidence. You simply refuse to review them." He opened his mouth to respond, but then froze as Jasmine highlighted one section. The gallery leaned closer. The screen zoomed in on a single signature authorizing a transfer of more than $2 million. It read, "Howard Gates." The room gasped. Every whisper stopped at once. The silence was heavy, broken only by the clicking of cameras. Judge Gates's face went pale. "That document is inadmissible," he said suddenly, his voice low but shaking. "On what grounds?" Jasmine asked calmly. "It was obtained improperly. It was subpoenaed directly by my office," she said, her tone steady and professional. Gates looked around the courtroom, trying to regain control. "Then it was mishandled. It cannot be considered legitimate evidence." But it was too late. The damage was already done. Everyone in the room had seen his name. The jury, the press, even the defense team sat stunned. Jasmine folded her hands in front of her. "The people deserve to know where their money went," she said softly. "If this signature is not yours, Your Honor, then you should have nothing to fear." The judge's glare was icy, but his silence said everything. Jasmine did not look away. Then let the evidence speak for itself. The crowd murmured. Some turned to look at each other, whispering. The power in the room had shifted. For the first time, Judge Gates looked cornered. Jasmine waited a moment, then reached into her briefcase. "There is one more piece of evidence," she said quietly. The courtroom fell silent again as she placed a small recorder on the desk. With a single press, a voice echoed through the speakers. "Take care of it. I do not care how. Make sure she never gets those ledgers." Every person in the courtroom froze. It was unmistakable. The voice was Judge Howard Gates. Gasps filled the room. Reporters stood up. The defense attorney's jaw dropped. Judge Gates's face went red as he slammed his gavel. "Turn that off. That recording is illegal." "It was obtained with a federal warrant," Jasmine replied calmly. She lifted another document from her folder. "This is the transcript, verified and time-stamped by the Bureau. The voice belongs to you, Your Honor." Gates stood from his chair, shouting, "This hearing is over. You have no authority to play that in my courtroom." Jasmine met his eyes. "I was not asking for permission." For a moment, no one spoke. Then the doors at the back opened. 2 federal officers entered, walking straight toward the bench. One of them spoke firmly. "Judge Howard Gates, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and misuse of public funds." The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and the defense team tried to disappear into their seats. Gates backed away, but the officers stepped forward, reading him his rights. The sound of handcuffs closing echoed through the chamber. Jasmine remained still, her expression calm. This was not about revenge. It was about justice. As the former judge was led away, the crowd realized what they had witnessed, a moment where power fell and truth stood tall. The sound of handcuffs clicking echoed through the courtroom. Reporters surged forward, their cameras flashing like a storm of light. Judge Gates stood frozen as the officers read him his rights, his once commanding tone now replaced by silence. The same man who had mocked Jasmine minutes earlier was now being led away by federal agents in front of the same people he once intimidated. The gallery was stunned. Some gasped, others whispered in disbelief. A few reporters ran toward the doors, eager to break the story first. The air buzzed with the sound of justice being served. Jasmine stood still at her table, watching quietly. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. Her expression was steady, almost calm, as if she had prepared herself for this moment long before it arrived. This was not revenge, she said softly to a nearby reporter. It was accountability. Those words cut through the noise and settled over the room. Everyone felt their weight. For a brief moment, the chaos slowed down. Cameras stopped clicking, and even the murmurs faded. Jasmine gathered her files, thanked her team, and walked out of the courtroom while the crowd kept watching. The powerful had fallen, and truth had finally spoken for itself. Outside, the air was different. It felt lighter. Reporters surrounded her, but she simply told them, "Justice is not loud. It is consistent." Then she turned and left the building as the arrested judge was taken away in a police car. The story was not over. It was only beginning. Later that afternoon, inside a quiet conference room, the developer who had been under investigation sat across from Jasmine. His hands trembled as he spoke. "I will cooperate," he said. "I can prove everything, but I need protection." Jasmine studied him for a moment. "You will get protection," she said, "but only if you tell the full truth. No games, no partial stories. Everything." The man nodded nervously, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You do not understand," he said quietly. "Gates was just a small part of it. The real money, the real orders, came from higher up." Jasmine leaned forward. "Then start from the beginning," she said. He hesitated, then pulled a flash drive from his pocket. "This has names, transactions, and communications. If this goes public, people will lose their minds." The room fell silent. Jasmine took the drive, her expression unreadable. "Good," she said, "because this was only the beginning." As the screen fades, the narrator's voice returns, calm but charged with anticipation. Justice found one target today, but what Jasmine uncovered next would shake the entire system. Cue outro music. If you want to see what happens next, subscribe now, because the real story is just starting. In the end, Jasmine's story was never just about a courtroom or a single corrupt judge. It was about what happens when power loses its conscience, and one person decides to stand against it anyway. She proved that courage is not loud. It does not always look heroic. Sometimes it looks like quiet persistence, steady focus, and an unshakable belief that truth still matters. Power without accountability always turns into corruption. But when someone dares to question it, everything begins to change. Jasmine showed that justice is not handed to anyone. It is built, piece by piece, by those who refuse to give up. Ask yourself this. If you were in her place, standing alone against authority, would you have the courage to keep going? That question is what this story leaves behind. Because the world does not just need more power. It needs more people brave enough to tell the truth. So where are you watching from? And what part of this story hit you the hardest? Do you think justice always wins in real life, or only when someone fights for it? Share your thoughts in the comments. And make sure to subscribe. We bring you powerful, true-to-life stories of courage and truth every single day. Because sometimes, even in the darkest rooms, justice finds its light.